Alright, a very warm welcome back everyone. Today we want to talk about the Brickwall limiter after having talked about the standard limiter, and they actually do have some things in common. So if I'm just bringing the Brickwall limiter up here, you see that you have a threshold and probably also the limiter for comparison purposes. You see that you have a threshold here, you have a release parameter, and the release parameter as for the standard limiter, which you can again put to auto release, and the threshold is basically the output you would have here, right? And you also have this little button, direct intersample clipping, which basically allows you to use the Brickwall limiter as a true peak limiter, which is usually the way you would use this Brickwall limiter functionality in comparison to the standard limiter. And the way this works is basically, what true peak actually means is depicted in this pictogram here. So you have like your audio signal or your signal in general, and this signal has some sort of peak. This is the true peak you are seeing here, and I've not reset this from the last video. And then you have a ceiling that you are aiming for. In the situation of the last video, we aimed for -1 decibel. So this would be the -1 decibel line we have here. But this does not mean that the limiter is actually able to hit this -1 decibels. It is able to hit this in the limiting process, but the true peaks may be higher. So the real peaks that you are going to see in your material might be higher than minus threshold or minus target decibels you are aiming for. And this is why you have this direct intersample clipping here, which is recognized by the Brickwall limiter, and then it is brought down to the value that you are aiming for in the threshold here. So let me put this to -1 decibel, so that we basically are talking about the same thing for the standard limiter and for the Brickwall limiter. And if you remember that we had a output of -1 for the limiter as well, but we reached a true peak of -0.5. And I'm going to play back the signal once again in a non-limited way, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And you also want to take a look at this true peak here. Alright, so we have -3.7 decibels, that's okay. So what you recognize is that you don't have any functionality of raising your input gain for the Brickwall limiter. And this is one of the reasons why we have the pre-gain section here. You have this gain here, which basically allows you to attenuate or raise the loudness of your signal before it goes into the whole channel. And in this case, we can use this pre-gain section in order to put input or raise the input for our Brickwall limiter. So I'm going for 5 decibels here. So these 5 decibels would be the same as the input of 5 decibels that we had for the standard limiter, right? And if we play back the signal now, we see that we have an input gain of 1.3 decibels, which is then reduced by 2.3 decibels to 1.0. And if you go in the absolute values, this makes sense because 1.3 plus 1 is 2.3, right? So this is the reduction we are getting. But, and this is very important, if you pay attention to this true peak button, to this true peak here, you see that you are not going to overshoot your -1 decibels you are setting as your threshold here. Even if I'm just going for not 5 decibels, but let's say 3 decibels, and then going for a threshold of -3 decibels, just to make this similarly loud, and I'm going to reset this loudness here, you're going to see that we are not going over the -3 decibels here. We are hitting the -3 very closely, but we are not going to overshoot this. This is the essence of what a true peak limiter does. So it allows you to limit, but it will preserve all of your true peaks and keep them below your desired threshold level here. So, and one thing you can do is, if you want to have, on the one hand, your signal limited and compressed, you can either do so with using this gain here and using a Brickwall limiter, or the different option would be you use a standard limiter in front of or before your Brickwall limiter, and use your standard limiter with an output ceiling of -1 decibels, the same as the threshold here. Put your input gain up to, let's say, 5 decibels. Maybe let the limiter do some work. Auto release here again. And then you have basically your limiter going for your output of -1 decibels, overshooting this because the standard limiter is not a true peak limiter, but then going into the Brickwall limiter. The Brickwall limiter will then cut these peaks and put everything to your desired threshold. So let's listen how that sounds. And you see, no matter how hard I'm trying to hit my limiter, we are not going over our -1 decibel mark. And this is because the true peaks that this limiter introduces, as we've learned in the last video, will be -0.5 decibels, and then you have the Brickwall limiter, which then tries to smoothen everything and put this to -1 decibels and not overshooting anything of this.